I'm super excited to be back in Sofia. I love coming here, although every time I get this intro, it makes me feel just a little bit older. And I was actually sitting in the front row, looking up at the screen at some of the heads in behind, and I realized, and I can actually show you this, I was going, that guy up there, he's got this bald spot going on in the back of his head. And then I went, oh my God, it's me. This is not good. So apparently, yes, I'm losing my hair, and hopefully we'll give you some good stuff that makes up for that. Today, what Gasper and I thought we would do is we would actually talk a little bit about Excel, and also, of course, the conference theme is all you need is Excel, but we actually kind of like Power BI too. How many of you actually work with Power BI? How many of you absolutely love Power BI? You think it's amazing? Okay, see, I'm not going to go quite that far, but I do love Excel. But I actually love working with them together because one of the things that I think is really cool about Excel is that in Excel, I've got many of the tools that I have inside Power BI. So I can actually build up my models and get all of the benefits of the structured modeling tools that Power BI has. I can get all of those in Excel. So I can actually build nice rectangular tables, I can build data models, I can do DAX, which is amazing. But I also have the ability in Excel to actually drop back and do completely ad hoc stuff as well, stuff that doesn't fit into rectangular forms and has little cells over here and there and everywhere else. I think that's fantastic because that is what has made Excel so successful around the world. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to start by building a model in Excel, and then what we're going to do is we're going to step past, or we're going to build this up, and then we're going to hand this model over to Gasper, and Gasper's going to do the things that Power BI is really good at, things like building new visuals, which is something that Excel's visual story could use some help, okay? But Power BI's is really good. And the other thing that Power BI has over Excel in certain areas is that Power BI is much more secure. And I was actually having a chat with Boris Christoph at lunch about some of the challenges we have with leaking data around in the organization, whether it's in PowerPoint or Excel. And this is one of the things that we'd like to obviously stop. So, especially after seeing Boris's presentation with all of his PowerPoint, we decided the most important thing to do with ours is to do this and bring back our desktop. Yeah, every time you exit PowerPoint when you're presenting, it knocks off the entire screen, which is always fun. So now that I can get that back, I'm going to do this with PowerPoint. There we go. So what are we going to start with? What we've got is we have a file here, which is, it's about 80 megabytes. It's huge. It's gross, it's awful, it should never ever be used in this fashion, but this is a worksheet where somebody has been diligently tracking their sales year over year, and they've got some hidden columns in here, and eventually they'll scroll back into this thing and they'll say, oh, well, we need to update our sales records in this area, and they'll start manually typing in values. The challenge that we have here, it's kind of gross, it needs some help, some color would be great, but we need to try and unwind this to actually build something better so that we can serve it up and actually have some control over it. Now, the challenge I've got is I've got some beautiful headers here. I've got 4 lines of nested headers. I've got a whole bunch of stuff on the left-hand side. I've got a whole bunch of cells. If I go Control-End on this thing and go right down to the bottom, we're in row 72,970 and column NB. I don't know how many cells that is, but it's a heck of a lot. Way too many to actually be working with. So my favorite thing to do with this kind of a spreadsheet is close it and pretend I never saw it. So there we go, it's gone. Now, Gasper and I sat down over a couple of rakias last night, and we said, okay, let's figure out what this table needs to look at. Oh, we're not supposed to talk about that? Oh, shoot, okay. All right, so we were very professional last night, and we sat down and we figured out what columns we would actually need to drive the model that Gasper actually needed for his reporting. So these are the ones we came up with. Gasper said, well, I'm going to need to do something with country, some groups and some categories and things like that. So can you serve me up a model that looks like this, Ken? And I said, okay, well, sure, why not? Let's go and see if we can actually take that horrible, ugly Excel file and turn it into a proper data model. Now, this is going to be fun and entertaining for me because I actually don't have enough room up here for my notes, so we're going completely hoping we can get this right. And there's 2 things that happen. Number 1, I've got to get the steps right, and number 2, I have to navigate Power Pivot without crashing it. Does anybody run into crashes in Power Pivot? Yeah, okay, so we'll see how well this goes. I've got some catch-up points that I've got built into this just in case things go horribly wrong. Now, in addition to this, I'm going to do a little bit of just prep here to get things done. I have a couple of parameters that I actually already have in here with Power Query. I've hard-coded some dates. The reason that I did this, normally I would prefer not to, but for performance reasons, this is a massive file, so I didn't really want to be standing on stage waiting for 5 minutes trying to tell jokes while it was refreshing, because at that point I'd have to reach into Liam's battery of jokes, and that's not good. So. Anyhow, I've also got my DAX measures already ready to go on this one. I've sort of worked those out so that I can copy and paste those so that you don't have to watch me try and navigate my way through writing DAX live on stage. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go and we're going to say get data. We're going to grab some from a workbook. And it's fortunately already navigated down to the folder I need, so I'm just going to double click on this guy and we'll open it up and we'll take a look at what we have. Looks like it has a worksheet. And apparently it'll generate a preview, which doesn't look super fantastic, but that's okay. We're going to go to transform data anyway, and we'll see what we can actually get out of this. That kind of freaks me out, actually. That preview looked pretty nasty. And what do we get? Oh, look at all that data. So this is beautiful, right? Because when you actually see empty cells in Excel, Power Query fills them all in with all these nulls, so it seems kind of hard to read. But I think I know a little bit about this data, but I do recognize that there's one little challenge I have, and that is that the header has automatically been promoted. So I'm just going to go back and I'm going to delete these 2 steps because that would actually mess me up a little bit along the way here. Now, this query here, I'm going to go and call this one raw data. What I like to do with Power Query when I first connect to my data source is I actually like to create a query that's called raw data, specifically so I have something that I can always go back to if I need to spin off another dimension or another fact table or do things in a different way. Now, when I look at this data, I can see in row 3 a header for 2016 all the way over here. The rest of the data at the top of this is actually garbage. So what I'm going to do is say remove rows, remove top rows, and we're going to knock off the top 2 rows. And that will be the majority of the data prep that I want to do at this stage. And now just to keep myself nice and organized, I'm going to move this raw data into this raw data connections here. Now, the next challenge that I want to deal with is I need to unpivot this data. But this data is kind of challenging. Actually, you know what? There's something else I might want to do with this one as well. Nah, we'll leave this one as is for right now. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to right-click on this, and I'm going to reference this query. And for this query, what I really want to do is I want to work with a nice little trick. You know, for the last 3 years that I've been here, I've been teaching Power Query masterclasses. How many of you have come to the Power Query masterclasses? Awesome. Okay, cool. So in that masterclass, you guys all saw a pattern of where we unpivoted subcategorized data. Do you remember this one? Yeah, maybe, sort of, no? Okay, or maybe not. So the trick for this thing is that we need to transpose the data. We need to flip it sideways. The problem here is that I've got about 80,000 rows all the way up to column NZ, and when I go and say, hey, let's go and do a transform transpose, which is what's needed, it actually goes into this process where it starts doing some processing. And if you know anything about me, one of the things you'll know is that I'm not very patient, and that's already exhausted my patience. I'm done with this. So I'm going to go back and say, you know what, let's just delete that step because there's too much data. We're taking 79,000 rows of data and trying to tip it sideways. And Power Query doesn't really like to do that. It's a very expensive operation. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to come here and make an adjustment to this pattern that we use for big data, and I'm going to make a query called headers. And this query here only actually needs the top 4 rows. So I'm going to go to home, and I'm going to say, let's keep rows. We'll keep the top rows, and we're going to keep the top 4 rows. So this strips it down to just looking at this little list here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to transpose the data. You guys already saw how long it was taking before. At this point, I can click it, and boom, it's done. Okay, so it works well when we actually get this into the right order. So I've got 3 different columns of data that I have going on here. And I'll just zoom in on this one a little bit so you can see it a little bit better here. It's got lots of nulls, it's got some years, and it's got some months. And what I really need to do right now is grab these 3 columns and say right-click and fill down. Now, I love this operation. This is one of my favorite things in Power Query. If you've got blank cells, we can just fill right down to it. Really hard to do in Excel, super easy in Power Query. I remember, I think, Liam, when we were in Australia, we had one lady that came to us, and she says, I've spent, was it 4 hours every weekend or something like doing this? And we're like, oh, yeah, just right-click and fill down. She's like, oh, my God. Like, this changes my life, right? I think, was that one? I think it was that example, yeah. So there's a lot of cool things we can do with this. Now, the trick for the unpivoting subcategories is to take these 4 columns and say right-click, and we're going to merge these columns together, and we're going to use a separator. My personal favorite separator for this is the straight up and down bar here called the pipe. This is the shift backslash character. And the reason why I use this is because you rarely ever see this in real data. If you do have this in real data, use a different pattern. You can use multiple characters, something different. The key here is we're looking for something to make absolutely certain that when we search for it later, we never get a false positive by accidentally picking up something else. The column name doesn't truly matter because it's going to disappear later anyway. At this point, when I go and say OK, it puts everything together here nicely. I can now go and tip this back with a transpose, and I've got a beautiful, well, not quite so beautiful, header row because it's got all these extra pipes in here. So I'm going to grab these, right-click, we're going to replace values, and we'll replace the pipe with nothing. And at that point, I've got an awesome-looking header row out of 4 different rows of data. Okay? So that's the first step. What I'm going to do with this is I'm going to move this into my staging queries area. This is where I like to say this is where I manipulate data. And I'm going to go back to raw data, and I'm going to right-click on this again, and I'm going to say reference. Now, in this one, this query here is going to be my data rows query. And basically, the gist of this pattern goes that whatever I kept in the top one for headers, the 4 rows that I kept there, I'm going to remove at this stage. So I'm going to say home, remove rows, remove top rows, and we'll get rid of the top 4 rows. Now, that knocks those off, but I can already see in here that I have a little bit of a challenge when I'm looking at this stuff here. These columns here are all sort of kind of fanning out and back and whatnot. I need to fill these ones down as well, so I'm just going to do that here too. We'll say right-click, and we'll say fill down. And just like that, the majority of the data is ready to go, but I have a bunch of totals and subtotals in here too. Fastest way to get rid of them in this data set is to actually grab this column and say, let's get rid of every row that has a null value in it. And just like that, we've now shortened the data up so that I have a header query that is just the 1 row, and I've got a data query which is giving me all of the data that actually belongs together. Okay? Does that make sense so far? All right. So the next trick with this is to take our data rows and our header rows and put them together into one table. So I'm going to go right-click on my header rows, and I'm going to choose Reference. And right over here, I'm going to rename this query. I actually prefer to do most of my query renaming on the left-hand side here. This is going to be staging-sales, I think, is what I'm actually working with here. And I also like to put this one at the top because it's the most important. And what I'm going to do with it now is I'm going to go to Append Queries, and we're going to append the data rows to it. So now, what I used to have with 4 levels of nested headings here is now in a beautiful header row with all of the data across the top. At this point, I can now pop it up to use it as headers. There we are. That looks pretty good. And I can go through it and say, okay, does everything look like it's in good shape here? The columns look like they're okay. That's all good. Yep, everything's good there. Except that I have a whole bunch of columns. Let me see if I can actually change the shape of this Power Query window just a bit more so we can see a bit more. There we go. So I've got a whole bunch of columns on the right-hand side, though. These are all of the values from the different subcategorized pieces of data. These are the pieces that I need to unpivot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here. We're going to grab country. Oh, yeah, I don't know, for those of you who, how many of you work with Power Query in Excel? All right. How many of you have this feature in Power Query in Excel? Just the guys in the front of the room and a couple of other hands. All right, so you just identified yourself as an Office Insider. If you're desperate for this cool feature, this is amazing. I'm super happy to actually have this here now. This, as well as the colored text in the formula bar, is amazing. These updates actually came out for Power Query in, I believe it was around August, Guy, is that right? Are they still bound to the Insider channel, or are they available for everyone? Oh, sweet, love it. I've been waiting for this for a long time. Now I have to find other excuses why my book is not being written. But anyhow, but this is pretty cool. I mean, with this stuff in place, we get a lot of insights and a lot of intelligence out of it. I'm going to zoom back for a second because I want you to see that I'm grabbing all of these columns here that are all of my dimensions. And what I'm going to do now is right-click, and I'm going to choose to unpivot other columns. And just like that, I've unpivoted everything so that I've got a nice, narrow table with all of my stuff here. How many people here have unpivoted data before? All right, how many people here have never unpivoted data before but always wanted to? Okay, the rest of you haven't lived, obviously. I mean, come on, right? It's a hard operation to do until you got Power Query, right? Just saying, if you haven't been using Power Query, you really need to start. Now, inside this data, I have a lot of rows that are 0. We're doing an analysis, a financial analysis of stuff here. So Gasper doesn't really care about rows that are 0 because when you add them together, they still come to 0. So we don't need those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter these out, and we'll get rid of all of the rows here that have zeros in them. And at this point, I'm going to go back and say, all right, that's cool. Let's break our attribute column apart. So we'll go right-click, and we'll go to split column. We'll split column by delimiter, sounds appropriate. And Power Query helpfully picks up that I'm using the pipe character and offers to split at every occurrence of the delimiter, which is the right thing to do in this particular pattern. And just like that, we now have 4 new columns of data that have been broken out from our pivoted headers. These were the previous header rows, are now part of my actual row context. Inside here, I'm going to make some changes to a couple of things as well. I have a lot of blank rows in this area, but before I get to those, I'm going to go into my attribute 3 here, and I'm going to filter this and say, let's go to text filters, does not contain, and I want to make sure that I don't have any rows that contain the word total. And now we'll say OK, so that's going to filter those guys down a little bit. At least I assume it's running a query refresh. All right. Every time I'm doing this, I'm getting something different, which is always fun. Now I'm going to go to this attribute. The rest of these guys here that also have all these blank rows, turns out that they were actually totals and subheadings and things like that as well. They're not necessarily in the same order as certain pieces, so I'm going to filter these guys out as well and remove all the blanks. So I had to go back and spend a lot of time looking at the data last night to make sure that was actually true, but it definitely is. Now, when I look at this kind of stuff here, if I'm recalling correctly here, see, unfortunately, this is the part where I have fun without notes. I believe this is my division. There we go. And this one here is looks like a product group. Am I right on that, Gasper? Yeah. All right, perfect. And we'll go with a value column. We're going to go and call this amount. Now, I am going to need another column for this data. I'm going to need something with a month end in it. So rather than try and figure out the formula for this, that's way too much work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to add column from examples. Now, the nice thing about column from examples here is that I get this little thing up here, and I can say, all right, so we got July 2018. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to say, let's go with July 1, 2018. Yeah, you're darn right. Wow, come on, man, give that some love. I mean, that's huge. This is one of the things Guy's been working on. This is amazing. All right, so here we go. This is a date column. There we go. We'll make that one, and we'll say OK. Unfortunately, Guy, I don't have time to send happy feedback. I wish I did, but we can do that later. We're going to convert this into a date, and then I'm going to go to our date column, and we'll go to transform, date, month, and end of month, and we'll convert all of those to month-end dates. This is a beautiful thing, too. This function is February 28th, 29th aware. Way easier than doing this Excel with classic formulas, unless you got EO month at your disposal, of course. I'm going to grab these 2 columns, which I no longer need. I'm going to delete them. And just like that, I believe I have a beautiful staging table that is all set up with all of my data in it. And now I need to see a little bit more because I want to go and make sure that this guy here is going into the right group. It is. Everything's set. So at this point, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and say home, close and load, and I'm going to lock down all of these queries and just make sure that they're loaded so that if anything goes horribly wrong, I don't have to recreate them all on stage in a hurry. Now, the next piece that I need to do, my staging sales data has basically a big flat table. I could land that and I could make a pivot table, but that's like so 1995, right? That's the classic way of doing pivot tables, and we want to be a little bit more modern because we want to set things up for the future where we actually maybe get another fact table or we want to do some DAX measures or things like that. So I'm going to spin off a variety of dimensions and fact tables in order to drive this dimensional model. To do that, I'm going to start by right-clicking and choosing reference, and I'm going to go and try and remember all of the columns that I actually need in order to do this. The first one, I believe that my customers, if I go and click on customer and I go and pick on country, all of my customers belong in a country somewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click now and say remove other columns. Because I selected customer first, it automatically puts customer first in the list. But you'll notice that I got the same customer many times. If you work with Power Pivot, you have to have a many-to-one relationship for making your joins. So I want a unique list of customers. I'm going to choose right-click and remove duplicates to actually deduplicate this list and come down to just a unique list of customers. That looks beautiful. I'm now going to take this and say this now becomes my customers table. We'll take him, slide him up into the dimensions area. This has no impact on anything about where it loads, just because I like to keep organized. The next table we're going to look at, we're going to go right-click, and we're going to choose reference again. So I'm going to use multiple queries off of this guy here. And what should we look at for this one? Let's see, how about products? That'll be the next one that we're going to do here. So products, Try and spell that correctly, otherwise it'll drive me nuts. And here we go. We'll put this one in here. And for products, what goes with our products? Gasper, we got a product and we got a product group. And which one? The category as well? Yes, all right, cool. I'm still trying to figure out this data. Gasper served me up this new one a little while ago, and I'm still trying to get 100% used to it. So we'll remove duplicates on our products, because those are supposed to be unique keys as well. And at that point, we've got a nice little table set up for that. I believe the next one I want is business units. So we'll come back to staging sales. We'll choose reference. And for my business units, I'm going to wait. I'm going to be looking for the business unit over here. And the business unit, I believe, also has the salesperson associated with it. Is that correct? No. It's the business unit, the division, and the product group. Those ones. Right-click, remove other columns. Right-click, remove duplicates. We get down to a nice table here for our business units. And I'm tired of waiting for that to refresh, so I'm just going to throw that up here and move on to staging sales and do another right-click and reference. And it will refresh that one in the background for me as I go along. The last table I need is salespersons, which is going to be my salesperson here. Right-click, remove other columns, and right-click and remove duplicates. So this gives me all of the dimensions, or the ways that I can actually slice my facts, but what it isn't giving me right now is a way to actually provide a fact table for things to actually be summarized. So this is the one more piece that I need here, and we're going to go back here once again, and we'll choose reference. For this one, this is going to be my flat-out sales table, and I'm going to move this across the side because I just realized I've got one more dimension that actually has to go. Sales is going to be the biggest, longest one to deal with, so I think what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to create a separate dimension for my calendar table. One of the things that I love to do is I love to build a dynamic calendar table on the fly that always spans across the data. So I'll build a calendar that starts from a certain date and runs to an end date. To do that, we create our start date and end date queries, and unfortunately I've had to use hard-coded ones here. But I'm right now going to go and finish the calendar. So we'll go new query, we'll say from other sources, and way down the bottom of this list is the most powerful query of all called blank query. Love this one. All right, so, why did I put it in facts? I don't want it there. We want to have this one up here. Come on, drag and drop, there we go. And this one we're going to rename to be calendar. Awesome. So, the formula for calendar, for our table here, we're going to write this completely from scratch. This is where knowing just a little bit of M code can take you a long way. Let me just bigify this a little bit more so you can really enjoy what's going on here. So this is going to look like this. It's going to be curly bracket, and it's going to be number.from. Looking some beautiful IntelliSense coming up. This is going to come from the start date, and it's going to go to the, in Power Query, you do the colon by lying it down instead, just to be different. Number.from, end date, and I'm just going to go and put another space in here. So the spaces are not required, just makes it a little bit easier to read, and once we do this, we get this, a beautiful looking calendar table. Or not. You're actually right. I mean, some of you guys are laughing because that's not a calendar table at all. That's a calendar list. That's not a table. So when we click this to table button, and then as fast as possible, we click this thing because this is just here to slow us down. At that point, now we get a beautiful calendar table. That one's got a column header and it's got rows. It looks amazing. It looks even better if you go and rename this to date. Don't you think? Maybe not? All right. How about if we did something like this? I mean, there you go, right? Calendar table goes from start date to end date just like that. Now, Gasper wants a couple of extra columns in his calendar table. He asked me for these things here. He wanted a date. He wanted a year. So we'll just add that. He also wanted the month, I believe. And I think he also wanted the month name. But Gasper and I are in big agreement about this. We don't like month names that are full, long month names like that. That's way too much stuff to have in a chart. So what we'll do is we'll grab this, we'll go back to transform, and we'll say, you know what, why don't we go and extract the first 3 characters. There we go, 3, and say OK, and just like that, we've now got a beautiful looking calendar table we can load to our data model as well. Now again, in a normal scenario, we would actually drive both of these dynamically from the data. It's only because we don't want to be suffering a really, really long refresh on this data set because it's so long that I've actually gone with hard-coded. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go back to my sales table, and I'm going to look at setting up the key columns that I actually need in order to drive this. So I'm going to need some different columns in order to drive my whole model out. Let me go, I'm going to actually unzoom from this so I can see what's going on here. I'm going to go scroll across the right-hand side. I obviously want to have the date. That's going to be important. I'm going to hold down my control key here. We're obviously going to need the business unit. We're going to need the customer. We'll probably need the product as well. And I think the salesperson's probably going to be important on this one too. And I think that that looks like it's probably about it. So we'll go right-click and we'll say Remove Other Columns. And just like that, we've got a beautiful looking fact table, except that I dropped the most important piece of the entire fact table, which is the sales dollars. Not so smart. So we'll just click the gear icon and bring that one back. And there we go. Now we've got our amount in here as well. The next thing I should probably do is go and just set the currency data type on this one as well to make sure that it's good to go. So that's the background, excuse me, that's the background of actually building up all the query stats for this. What I'm now going to do is go and say, let's load all this to the data model, and now I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that this doesn't take an excessively long time to actually go. So here we go. We'll start the refresh on this, and then we get to try and wait and see how long it actually takes to load all this stuff out. So I've done what I can for this file to try and speed it up. Remember, it is about 80,000 rows of data with a huge amount of columns, so even though this feels like it's going slow, it's actually doing a heck of a lot of work. I mean, it's unpivoting it, it's doing a bunch of stuff to it, it's spinning off new dimensions and getting all of our data prepped and ready to go for us. This would be a heck of a job to try and do manually, obviously. And the nice thing about this is that in future, I can also refresh it. One of the things that I'm really big on when I work with this kind of stuff is I actually don't really care how long this process takes generally. There's two reasons for that. Number one, I don't believe that all time is created equal. If you actually go and you build one of these models and you tell your users, look, hit refresh, go walk down the hallway and get a coffee and come back and it's going to be ready, they can accept that most of the time. If you do this part wrong though, and you give them a data model that is not in good shape, and they click a slicer and they have to wait 10 seconds for that, that is the end of the world, okay? Nobody accepts that. It's unusable. I can't work with this. So when we actually shift this stuff into a front load for the refresh, then it's not such a big deal. I mean, you know, people get used to it. Hit refresh, walk away. You're not doing a refresh on a regular basis. The second reason why I'm not super concerned about the refresh time is when I'm done with this and I publish this to Power BI, at that point in time, I can actually go, because this data actually lives in SharePoint, I can schedule the refresh, so no matter how long it takes, it's Microsoft's problem, not mine. And that's always a good thing, right? I mean, let's delegate this stuff off until they find a way to charge me for a really slowly loading data model. So, all right, so where are we at? We're about 30,000. Geez, this is not good. I'm going to have to start busting into some jokes. I don't have any good ones. Liam, do you have any I can borrow? Good ones? Good ones, yeah. Yeah, I guess that's what I figured. I was afraid of that. Let's see. So, it's a horrible thing waiting, isn't it? There we go. So, what have I got? I'm 40,000. I think we're halfway there now, aren't we? No, didn't we say we got about 59? 59, okay. Well, in that case, the car is racing forward. Here we go. We're at 51. Do I hear 52, 53? Come on, let's go, Power Query. You know, for all the time this saves me, I spend a lot of time watching this screen, I'll be honest. It always feels like it's going slower than it should. 59,152. Done. All right. So we've got to the end on this. Now, all of these things are in the data model. That is fantastic. So now we need to go and we need to do a little bit of data model work. So we're going to go and, by the way, if you're doing this in the real world, this is a great time to save. Trust me on this. All right, so I got all my tables over here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, all right, cool, I've got sales here. I feel like I ended up with an extra table out of all this somehow. Okay, what is going on now? There we go, thank you. All right, so we've got a business unit that will link to our business unit. And that's going to do its thing right about now. That looks good. All right, we can link our calendar date to our calendar date. I'm just going to spin this one out the side so I can see it a little bit easier. We're going to link our product to our product. And we'll link our salesperson to our salesperson, and our country to our customer to customer. There we go. That looks pretty good. What I'm going to do now is, you know, Gasper's a good friend of mine, and you know I trust him implicitly, but sometimes I kind of wonder what he does with his pivot tables. So I'm actually going to hide these fields off so that he can't hurt himself when he's actually working with this model, because you know it's just the kind thing to do. Yeah, it is a big vote of confidence, bud. So now that I've done this, I've hidden all of these fields on the sales table. I need to go back and I need to add my DAX measures as well that I want to use. So here we go. We're going to go and grab this one. This is the first one. It's going to be a simple revenue for current year. And we're going to go over to Power Pivot, Measures, New Measure. This is my favorite dialog box to use for this. We're going to put it on the sales table. Then I'm going to zoom in a bit so you guys can see what I'm actually doing here. And I'm going to try not to make my mouse jump all over the place. So this is going to be revenue, CY, and we're going to go tab down here right past that description field that nobody ever uses anyway and is kind of in the way. There we go. If you hold down your control key and roll the mouse wheel up, you can see more of what's going on. We're going to go to currency. I'm going to get rid of this little symbol. I don't need that, and I'm going to leave it with 2 decimals. Sure, why not? So that's the first one. And now we'll come into this guy here. Now, unfortunately, I can't see the entire formula, so let's expand the formula bar. I like my DAX indented a little bit. Looks a little bit better. So we'll go measures, new measure. This one here, also going to be going on the sales table, is revenue, CYTD. And we're going to go and drop this guy right in place. We should probably check the formula too. That's always important. Although one thing I will say about this, just because you get a green check mark doesn't mean it's going to work. But if you don't get a green check mark, it definitely won't work. Okay? Always good, right? So here we go. It's like my accounting teacher used to tell me, just because it balances, Ken, doesn't mean it's right. All right, fair enough. So we'll go and we'll go and grab this guy here, copy this. This is going to be the revenue PY. So we'll go and say new measure on this one. Here we go, revenue dash PY, and we'll paste that in there, and we'll go and say, oh, we're going to make this a currency again, none. There we go. And we're going to go grab the last one, which is the revenue PYTD. All right, revenue PYTD. There we go, and paste, and that didn't paste very well. Oh, nice. I love it when it puts quotes around it. That makes it so much easier to use. And there we go. The only thing that would be better would be curly quotes, because those break everything. And nobody laughed at that. Seriously, nobody's ever run into something that has curly quotes that don't equal straight quotes. I think the curly quote was the most evil thing ever invented for the computer. How many hours of work have been lost to those? Anyway, at this point in time now, what we should see is we have a really nice looking data model. It's got a whole bunch of measures on it. We have a single fact table. It's in a nice star schema shape. That looks beautiful. This should be pretty awesome for Gasper. So what I'm going to do with this at this point in time now is I'm going to go and I'm going to say, let's do a file save as. And I'm going to save this model. Now I'm going to save it on my desktop, and there's a reason why I'm doing this. Normally I'd prefer not to. I'd prefer to just save it right into the folder that's actually set up on OneDrive. But the problem is when I go to publish this to Power BI, if it's in a folder that's on OneDrive, that's linked to my Teams site, that would seem to be shareable for all of my corporate, it won't let me publish there. It'll only let me publish to my workspace, which doesn't make a lot of sense. On the other hand, if I've got it saved on my desktop, I can publish it anywhere. So what's this all about? Well, if I go to File, Publish, what's going to happen now is it's going to ask me where would I actually like to publish this to. And I'm going to choose the workspace that Gasper and I are using called BT Consumer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to export this data model. I'm going to replace what's up there because we've obviously been testing it and whatnot. And this is now publishing this data model to Power BI. Notice I've done no validation or testing of that kind of stuff, because who does that, right? I mean, you just throw it over the wall to the next guy that's got the job, and he can play around with it. But what's actually happened here now is that basically it's taken the Excel file, and it's not exactly, but kind of converted it into the Power BI file on the back end, the PBIX. It publishes the entire model. So I'm building everything in Excel, publishing it to Power BI, and now we have the ability to actually control and lock down the sharing of it, which is actually super important. So at this point, are you ready to go and take over and do a little bit of work on this? Awesome, cool. I'm going to pull my laptop off of here. I'm going to get out of the way, and I'm going to let Gasper come up and take over the next stage, where he's going to connect to this model from Power BI Desktop and do a little bit of work with some visuals and whatnot as soon as his technical challenges are out of the way over there. And he'll build you a nice little dashboard out of this thing, and we'll see where it goes from there. So. I left your mouse pad.
Oh,
you should bring your laptop. That's important.
You think?
Yeah.
Thank you. Is that because of the letters last year?
Well, maybe. Are we
afraid
going
of
to
me
finish
going
off with
rogue
those
again?
letters? We should finish off with the letters, don't you think?
Oh, first try, brilliant. Okay, so what Ken showed you is kind of the Excel scenario of getting data, Power Query, brilliant stuff. But there's a hidden gem in there, in a sense that he got all that data, then he twisted it around, got his tables, and then the way he pushed it out to me, those were no longer tables, those were no longer Excel files. He pushed it out to me as a data model, right? So the way you consume data models in Excel would be your Power Pivot, and that's exactly what Ken used to build it. But I'm going to consume it with a different kind of monster, and that would be your Power BI. Now, talking about Power BI or Excel, what would you say would be the two pro-Power BI reasons? Visuals, definitely. Yeah, visuals. Any more? Yeah, security, that's a good one. Security. Speed, okay, well, that's a relative one. If you have 5,000 euros per month, then it's very fast. So the one I'm actually going for is, and the one you'll always hear, would be sharing. The way you share, right? And I'm thinking that one was wrapped up in security, kind of, because you're not sending out files, but you're just sending out web pages in a way. And what's amazing about this is that I'm going to use all of the things that you just implied as building a dashboard that I'm going to share back to Ken, okay? And in a process, I don't know if you noticed this or if this was even told, but in the process, Ken is my IT guy, and I'm the analyst, okay? So he just builds me this, you know how it is. Analysts, we just say, we need this data. And then they do their stuff, magic, and then he says, here's your data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go get data, but this time I'm going to get it where? Well, I'm going to get it from a Power BI dataset. And this is working extremely fast. There it is. And I'm obviously called Gasper Co, so thanks for that. Okay, I'm just going to connect to it with the speed that we have seen it will take. There it is. So you see, all I see are these tables. But now let's create something amazing. Oh, and I want to point out, right, in a difference from the usual Power BI experience, the only thing I get is this. I can create my reports. I can't see my data. And the one that really hurts me, I can't write measures. But okay. The IT guy will do that for me.
Maybe one day we'll let you graduate to that.
Thank you. Thank you. Feel very honored. Okay, so let's build a report, and let's start like this. Let's start with a little line. And this line, we're going to rotate it by 90 degrees. We're going to make it somewhat gray. Let's make it a thin line. Okay, there it is. I just want to point out that this will be one of those where for a long time it will look as if I'm doing childish thing, but then in about 2 minutes' time, this will be the greatest thing you've ever seen. That was probably me. Let me just do that. There you go. So something like that. And then if I set it, let's stand behind it. So let's say greatest sales report ever. Like this. And let's just bring that to something like that. That's modesty for you. There you go. Okay, so what am I going to need? Well, I'm definitely going to need to do things by year. So let me add year, but let me add it as a slicer. So give me years. Anytime soon. There you go. And give me as a drop down, I don't need this. So like this. So I'm gonna pick my year. Okay. And now for my lovely, lovely dashboard, I'm gonna do, let's do it by month. And let's do sales. So I got the revenue current year, revenue previous year. Brilliant. Okay. So let's look at that in a better way, sort of. Okay. And at this point, I have something like this. But we all know that looking at current just by monthly data, you don't actually see which year is better overall. So we're going to do a spin-off of this. And this one, we're going to use year to date. So this one and this one. Okay, there you go. We keep getting better. Yeah, it's true. Okay. And now I want to sort of see this in a much better way, because this means nothing to me. But the first thing, before I do a truly amazing thing, is I just realized that my IT guys, they weren't thinking. They weren't thinking in a way that I want to, see my data. So let's just call my IT guy. Oh, there you go. He's alive. So what I would really like is, if I need sort of two visuals to view data monthly or year to date. Classic, right? Okay. So if I view things monthly or year to date, I really need a switch so it can be one visual that can be either one of those. So what I would like my IT guy, that's obviously so busy, to do, this will just take a second. I need a disconnected switch table for switching between monthly and year to date. There you go. Now, we're going to skip the usual 5-hour routine of conversation that would follow where I actually explain what that is. We're just going to pretend he knows. And luckily, oh, let's stop with that. So, where are you with the, you got it? Okay. Just a bit. Oh, there it is. I think. Yeah, sure, for sure. So it's like this, and what I got now is I can do my calculation, switch, and let's do one of those fancy slicers that everyone loves. So let's do a horizontal one like this. And now we got a visual like this, but we only need total revenue PY and total revenue. And I can switch between monthly and year to date if my IT guy did everything correctly. Okay. So right now, this is cool, but it's not way cool, but it's going to get way cool in about 2 to 3 minutes. So first, let's change this into something that actually shows you the differences correctly. So something like this, and let's do this better. So like this. Woo. Now, let's just stick with this one. And then let's have, because, okay, well, this is, it's okay. So I have my monthly differences. I have my monthly differences year to date. Let's go to 2018 if anything's different. There you go, that one looks even better. And now, I need to get that one for each division. So I have some divisions in here somewhere. Do you know where you put them? Business units, makes sense. So let's just do small multiples. So these are our 2 divisions right off the bat. And now let's go even further than that. Let's say, okay, well that's okay. But now I want to sort of see things like this. I want to see things by my products. And what I want is, I want my category, I want my group, and I want my total revenue and total revenue previous year. Again, this is not looking very, very good, but I'm going to change it in a minute, like this. And now, this is looking better. Still not what I'm looking for, but there it is, almost. Probably should be like this. That doesn't look right. No, it's, I think these 2 are correct. Values are 2, previous year is this. Let's go with a different one. Let's go with a business group. Okay. Let's put division on front of that. There you go. That one looks kind of better. So we got our electronics. Obviously, they did well. So let's see what group did how. Very good. So I'm kind of confused because this has got to be one of the most beautiful things you've ever seen. As far as reports are concerned, and yet you're probably sleeping. You're straight out. Okay. Well, so I'm going to finish here. I could do a lot more, but I'm thinking this in itself has got to be brilliant. So let's say the greatest sales report ever is ready for publishing. So what do? Well, I say publish. I save it as the, where should I put it? Let's put it in here. So let's say greatest sales report ever. Gasper. Cool. Okay, let's select that one. Okay, so at this point, I've got this. So can publish the dataset, and now I did my report. Looks kind of like this. Well, I'm hoping it will look better in a while. Oh, there it is. Scared there for a minute. Okay, yeah, still works. Okay, so this is my report, living live on Power BI. And now I'm just going to create a dashboard on the fly. I'm saying, create a new dashboard, and I'm going to call that one Overview. So up to now, I've used Excel, or can use Excel to create a data model, push it into Power BI. I use Power BI to create this report, and now I share it with him. But is there a way that I could actually connect to this from Excel now? Of course there is. And where is that? Well, it's where all the good stuff is, behind the three dots. Analyze in Excel. And sooner or later, who said it will crash? That's Leah. Come on.
You haven't seen it crash yet.
Well, you did see that I have 14 add-ins. That probably contributes to the speed. And it's a good thing none of you have epilepsy, because this... Wailing. There you go. Okay, so now I'm going to do something that Excel is good at. I'm going to say, okay, so I still want the months. So give me the months like this. So it's talking to Power BI now, and obviously they have some difficulty communicating. I need my total revenue. And now I'm going to pretend I don't know anything about pivot tables. And what I would actually want here is I would want a percentage. So each month, I would want the percentage of the total year. Okay? So if I know nothing about pivot tables, then I don't know that I can show values differently. So how would I do that? How would I do percentages? And let's make it even better. I would want my percentages to be in between here. So between the month name and between the total revenue. What's one of the best features of Power Pivot-based pivot tables? Well, one of the best features, and Liam knows this. No, but you accuse me of stealing this in Australia. So the best feature is I can actually change this into formulas. So it will still be behaving kind of like a pivot table in a sense that the slicer will still work, everything will work, but so there you go. Oh. So everything will work. There you go. But because these are only cells now, I can just go like this. Well, I can say, well, equals this one divided by this one, right? If I put that one here, let's do a little formatting. Let's do it on the entire thing. And let's put it like one. There you go. And now what I would want to do is I would actually want a chart of these like this. And this is some insight I couldn't actually get from the Power BI stuff. So I'm loving this. And now I want to share it right next to the report that I created previously. So what do I do now? So at this point, we went Excel, Power BI, back to Excel. Can you guess where I'm going now? Back to Power BI. And I'm doing it in two ways. The first way will be this. I'll say, well, this is a lovely workbook. Let's save it. So let's save it here. Let's go here. Oh, incredible analysis. Sounds about right. Let's save it like this. And the first thing I'm going to do with it will actually be this. I'll go to Power BI, and I'll say, okay, I want to get some data, and I want to get it from a file. And the file is local file. I have it on my, it's called Incredible Analysis. And I just want you to upload that one straight up to, and there you go. So at this point, I would call the IT guy. But this was not planned, so I will not call the IT guy. You didn't give me the rights, man. But I will not give up. Couldn't do this. I'll just do it the other way. I'll say, OK, I'll select all of these. I'll get rid of the grid lines, and I'll say, this, I want to pin this to Power BI. I want to pin this to the dashboard that I created previously, overview. There you go. And now, in Power BI, well, at least this one works. Update, yeah, sure, update. But first, just show it to me. Ah, there it is. We just did 2 circles from Excel to Power BI. And could you cut that out later on? Yeah, okay. Yeah. At the end of the, oh, there you go. Okay, so the key takeaway here should be that we started with data that was, well, you saw how it looked. And we changed that into a shape that seemed fine, but we changed it in a way that is refreshable. Right-click, refresh. And then we took that data and we said, OK, I don't want to give you the entire 59,000 rows of Excel data like this, but I'll let you play with it, because you're a professional, you like pivot tables, so I'll let you play with it. But we did an extra step. I'll let you play with it in Power BI. Why? Because we just got this wonderful visuals here that we can use, that we can utilize, and we can see our reports in a different way. So that's why we want to go Power BI. OK. And this, in a way, I didn't even see the data, right? So the data was just a no-lab cube to me, or actually whatever you want to call that. And then, once I created this, I publish it, and I can even go here back to my IT guy in a way. So where am I talking to my IT guy? Over here. And I can say, so IT guy, look what I did. And then just go add a Power BI tile from a workspace, BT Consumer, this one. And there it is. And my IT guy should have gotten notified, I guess. There it is. And this is probably even, it's not just a story, Power BI and Excel better together. It's becoming a story of Office 365 coming together. And if you know the power of Teams, where I've talked to my IT guy, where I've shared my report with IT guy and all that, you can see how this is a very, very strong scenario, right? And it's dealing with something that has been a big issue with Power BI is the leakage of data, so sending data somewhere out there and I don't know where it is. And it's solved with Power BI's greatest friend, Excel. Because all you get is the data model. OK, now Ken's going to join me, and we're going to take questions. I can see you were surprised.
Questions?
Surprised by what?
Buriana.
Oh,
Special
Buriana has a
Gasper.
question.
Yeah. What is your subscription to Power BI that you can share between Excel and...
Pro.
Pro.
Just Power BI Pro. And Gasper's even cheating. He's running on the free trial.
Oh, okay.
So as soon as that account exhausts it, we're going to make another one.
Okay, thank you.
No.
Yes. Marco.
I have a question on the file, the initial one, the raw
Yes.
data. So you created all the queries and the data model itself, but what happens when you add more data into the initial file? Because that happened to me like 1 week ago.
So what happens when we add more data to the file? That depends on how good I was about building the original query and whether or not I anticipated what the users are going to do. If they are following the same structure, moving across and whatnot, and they've got the same kind of headers in place and all that kind of jazz, as long as they've followed the consistent pattern that they had before, then everything's going to work just fine. The issue comes down, and this is one of the parts that's actually truly scary, is I hate working on user-generated data, because one of the things that we know about users is inherently they change stuff as they go along. If they change and they suddenly say, well, I'm going to insert, I think it's okay if they insert a couple of columns, but if they suddenly shift one of those rows down, man, the whole thing's going to blow up. That's going to be a big problem. So typically, if we are building a template like that we want somebody to use, we're going to put a lot of work into architecting that Excel template right off the bat. I mean, I'd be coloring the input cells in green. I'd be potentially locking down the columns so they can't be inserting new things and whatnot, and giving them some education, which is super, super important, and the part that everybody always forgets to do, because it's never easy, right? So as long as we can give them the boundaries and anticipate what they're going to do, then it's actually not so bad.
Other questions?
First of all, what's the name of the visual on the right, which you're using?
That one?
Yes.
They're both Zebra BI. One are Zebra BI charts and one are Zebra BI tables.
Okay, thanks. And second question, what would you have done differently, or maybe just share a few tips? How do you deal with multiple fact tables?
Multiple fact tables, I actually think that's the biggest strength in Power Pivot there is. And basically, as long as there is a bridging table of some kind between the multiple fact tables that you can actually link back and forth, then it's all good. I'm not sure what you're doing tomorrow, but I'm actually teaching a masterclass on that exact topic. So we're going through and we're actually looking at how do we take two fact tables that have a many-to-many relationship between them and actually link them together. And it comes back to building bridging tables or building composite keys in order to build bridging tables and different things like that. So I would actually say that by far the vast majority of models that I build have multiple fact tables. I know everybody loves to say get back to a star schema. That is never my reality. So it handles it gracefully as long as you design the model correctly. That's the biggest key.
Yeah, well,
Thanks.
my question would be almost the same. My answer would be almost the same, but there's you've heard of Marco Russo? So he said recently, and that's kind of funny because he writes measures that are this long, but he said if you have to write a measure that is this long, your data model is no good. And that is something to be derived from trying to get to the star schema, and if you can't do that, then get to the least amount of fact tables that you can. But then again, Power BI was conceived so that you can compare your sales data with your website data, with your everything data, marketing, HR, and those do kind of sound like different fact tables all by themselves. And sometimes you just have to go there.
Thanks.
Don't be shy.
Hey, what are the key steps that people need to consider when building such a complicated model? Like a line of the main points that people need to be aware of or be careful of, as you say?
Boy, that's a good question. That's another kind of an it depends, isn't it? One of the things that I'm sort of trying to work with when I'm doing my training classes right now is actually getting people to not just dive into data. And I'm a big fan of Power Query. I mean, you guys that have been here before all know this. That's what I'm most famous for is what I do with Power Query. But one of the things that I actually looked at myself earlier this year, I stepped back and went, I can do all these amazing things in Power Query, but I think we've lost sight as to why we're doing this. What is the goal of it's not about just turning stuff into tables. I mean, although that's what we do, it's about what kind of tables, what are the columns that we actually need, what do we actually need for a model. One of the things that Excel pros, and by that term Excel pro, I mean all of you, whether you think you're a pro or not. If you are working with data, you are an Excel pro if you're doing it in Excel. The key thing that I see a lot of Excel pros do when they build models is they grab absolutely everything they can just in case their boss might ask them something, which is actually the most horrible way you can possibly model. And yet we do it forever, right? Because nobody knows what the boss can ask you for. So I refer to that as just-in-case modeling. One of the biggest things that we can do is actually sit down and try and figure out, okay, let's think through this process. What is the report that we need? What are the columns in the table that need to drive that? What level of granularity do we need for this? And actually start thinking through the process very logically to work out what is it we need, then go and figure out where do we get it and how to transform that data in. I think if you approach things in that factor, you're actually going to find that you can actually build some really, really cool stuff. One of the big challenges I see is when people go, well, I've got data, I wonder what I can get from this. And they just start. I mean, it's a valid way of doing things sometimes, but ultimately it's not really the best way. So that would be my sort of number one tip, is think it through. And after that, I mean, you learn as much as you can as far as, you know, what techniques are fastest, what techniques are strongest, but it all takes time, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of guys doing the modeling that will start you off with an A4 blank sheet. Just draw what you want to see in the end, and then we'll figure out what you need to see this, and that will be the most compact and most light solution. And that one will also work the best.
Thank you.
In Teams, where you put the picture, is it just a picture, or does it interact with the dashboard?
Oh, you mean
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
This is
will
live.
it slice the work?
Yeah, this is, well, if my mouse would work, this is live.
Oh, cool.
That's why it's so cool.
Thank you. That's fab.
And I could even do this. If I went back to Power BI, I think I can do it. Let's see if I can do it. I can go to Overview, and I can say, yeah, there it is. Show me sales, or just show me this. Show me revenue. There you go. Or let's just do revenue current year. So show me revenue current year, where a country is, and you know where I'm going with this, right? Bulgaria, by year, on column chart. Okay, and now that I got this, let's just pin this one to the dashboard. And if I had a mic that I could drop, this would be the situation to do it.
If it doesn't do it, you're going to just pat your thing, unfortunately. Yeah. You tear your headset off and throw it on the ground.
We have time for one or maybe two questions more.
There's one.
Right? Wait.
Thank you. There was this scenario where you were asking, can your IT guy to supply something with kind of fancy name of sorts in capital letters, so on and so forth. So why was it that he had to supply it to you a second time? Didn't you have it already with all the queries?
Oh, you mean the... No.
Like
So
what
the
happened
disconnected table and
behind
slicer.
the scenes there, if you could share that?
So what he added was a extra table that was disconnected. So he would have to show you, because you could see his model, but he just did a table that was disconnected, and it had the choice of monthly, year to date, and it had the IDs 1, 2. Then he created a simple measure that if you select monthly, that was 1. If you selected year to date, that was 2. And then he put both calculations, the year to date and the monthly, in a single measure with switch. So he has said switch, look what's selected up there, and then if that's 1, calculate the monthly, and if that is 2, calculate year to date. That's why I was able to just do this, right? Have a single visual that was either year to date or monthly. And that was a disconnected slicer or disconnected table.
Yeah, a separate table is
As
not
they're
linked into
called.
the data model in any way.
Okay,
Yeah.
so can we say that the reason why he didn't get it in the first place was like a matter of security, like you needed to get some sign up from
Oh, no,
somewhere?
no,
for
that's
him to-
because
no.
IT guys just give you the what,
Right,
I mean,
okay,
the
like
least
you
thi-
didn't give him like
whatever he can do in 5
enough
minutes.
information in the beginning.
So the reason we did it this way was we wanted to demonstrate 2 things. Number 1, we wanted to demonstrate that we could publish a model. Number 2, we wanted to demonstrate that I could refresh from somewhere else without him ever having to touch it, and he would get a new update of these things without blowing up artist reports and all those kind of things. So that's sort of what the whole idea is. Gasper can't see that information because I didn't share that with him because I just don't trust him, right? He might break it. So
I do hope that the IT guy thing will stick.
Okay, thanks.
Ken will be the IT guy from now on. No, but the idea was, well, we wanted to present that it's a flow, and it's constantly changing, and I can go back and he can bring me fresh data and all that.
Last question.
Can we put those nice charts in PowerPoint presentation?
in PowerPoint, yeah, sure you can. Sure you can. Are we in the... No.
It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. Oh, really? Because it's a custom visual. It's not certified.
Well. Yeah, all right. Gasper's doing it the secure way, so you can't possibly leak your data.
No, so here's the truth. So in
Boris Christoph is not here.
Yeah,
You
no,
can
no.
do it in this way.
I think Boris would actually approve of this approach.
True. So in Power BI, you do have export as PDF. You actually can schedule that. The problem is this is a custom visual, and it's not yet certified. It will be in a month's time, and at that point, it will be exportable as a PDF. Now you would just get a blank rectangle and nothing in it. That's why I didn't do it that way. But you
Okay.
could.
Yeah. Any last words?
I think, last words I would say on this is that I think I run into a lot of people around the world right now that are saying, hey, we want to replace Excel with Power BI. And I actually think that that's a terrible decision. I think there's an incredible amount of strength in Excel. I think there's an incredible amount of strength in Power BI. But the reality of this is that these two products are better together. Excel is fantastic for both our structured modeling. It's fantastic for our ad hoc modeling to be able to do things that don't fit into a rectangular format. Power BI is fantastic for visuals and for sharing and security. Use them together. That's the way that they're actually designed. We can get past all of the shortcomings from both by actually working with them together. So,
Yeah, and my final note would be, this is our third year. Our second year is a joint session. And we really want to thank Boriana Petrova for inviting us and for throwing this together. So give it up.
Okay, thank you, Power BI Master Jedi.